Well, I'm Jeremy Coulter. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Leone Resources and the Leone Farms project. And my business partner is Richard Meads, who's the MD of the company. He's based in Sierra Leone. I'm based in the UK, and I spend quite a lot of my time in Sierra Leone. And it's a country that Richard and I both love and feel very deeply about. And this company has gone sort of beyond business to a bit of a passion for us, and we care deeply about it. My personal background is I started life after university. I studied geography at university, which gave me a love of travel and foreign countries. I started work as a journalist, and I had the pleasure of being a motoring journalist for 10 years. And I describe it as having a champagne lifestyle on a beer salary. And I drove all the cars you could possibly want to drive, and I wrote about them. I wrote books. I was involved in motor racing and rallying. I had quite an exciting time, but I got to my mid-30s and discovered that I couldn't really afford my mortgage. So I had to reinvent myself, and I went and started a small PR company with a friend, and that metamorphosed into an IT company, which we ran successfully for some time, right through to my involvement, my first encounter with Richard and Sierra Leone, and that is where this adventure started, and it's gone from being something in the background to being absolutely at the forefront of my life. And I put quite a lot of my own money into the company, maybe to get it started. So has Richard and his family. So personally, as an indication of our faith and commitment, we've got more than 300,000 of our own money already tied up in Sierra Leone, and we brought on other friends and family. So to date, we've had about £500,000 into the business to get us to this stage of being able to put a proposition to investors. And in terms of Nigel mentioned the plus market. Well, what happened is that we initially looked at doing a small IPO 3 years ago for Leone Resources on Plus, which was the most junior of the. Sorry, that was just me waving my wife away to close the door because I'm at home at the moment. Yes, we were looking at a small IPO on the Plus market, the most junior of the three markets as was, to raise us about £1 million. We put a lot of effort into it, a lot of money into it, and we got as far as having an almost complete emission document. We had all the DD done on our leases, on our corporate structure, on our personal background, everything that you need to do to become a public company. And Plus Market went into some in the form of meltdown, and they announced that they were putting themselves up for sale or shutting down. They stopped new admissions. So basically the whole thing ground to a halt. And we gave up on that route and reverted to raising money to keep the project moving privately. I encountered Andy Zagorski and Nigel, who introduced us to Powers Court, who, as I'm sure you know, are behind some of the most successful structured investments in the market, including SCS Farmland, Templemore. So, it's a really good association for us, and they've worked with us really closely to create the product. And it was in fact they who commissioned the Thomson Reuters due diligence report that's available to investors, and and they paid for it as well. which basically, this 100-plus page report, it analyses the country, the economics of rice production, the climate, yields, etc. It's every aspect. It's a really, really interesting document to have produced in association with with the business. So and it basically confirmed everything we said about the viability of rice farming. So there was almost no downside to it. So that was really, really encouraging in that it validated much of what we were.
Okay. So let me introduce myself. So I have been involved in finance for many, many years. In fact, ever since I left school. Met up with a chap called Andrew Zagorski, who you've spoken to, Derek. And it was Andrew that introduced me to Jeremy, explained what Jeremy was doing. I think when you do your bit, Jeremy, it's worth introducing the route that you went through with Plus Markets and the journey in which you've taken for us to sort of get into the retail sector. That was May 2012, I think we first met Jeremy. So this has been pretty much 2 years in the development, in structuring, in the making. We engaged with Powers Court Services from Cambridge. Who again, I know you know Derek very well. And it's been a journey, to say the least, in the last couple of years to get to where we are. But what we've really done with this product is take all of the lessons from old, all of the experience from old, and really structure this in a way that it absolutely works for retail clients and it absolutely works commercially too. So that's kind of briefly how I've got to where I am with Jeremy through my experience.
How long has the product been in the marketplace? How long has it been for sale this way?
In the retail sector, we are ready to go now, Mike, this time.
For the investor, and I pose this question to both of you really, for the potential small investor, because that's primarily what we're looking for, I think.
Yeah.
What are the risks?
Well, how would you in no particular order, with any agricultural investment, you'd have to say that there is a crop risk, there is a yield risk, there's a disease or pestilence risk. I'd counter that by saying that we have expert agronomy, selection of rice breeds, cultivation methods. The nature of the farms is such that they are in discrete areas, so a disease won't spread necessarily from one to the next, compared with a large prairie style investment. I think coupled with which, the climate in Sierra Leone is amazingly predictable. If you look at the historical rainfall figures, there is an infinitesimal chance of rain not appearing on time. The historical record demonstrates the robustness of the seasonality. I suppose the main risk that people would perceive is the political risk, the fact that it's Sierra Leone, which still has this, how should we put it, association of bad things, and people still think of it as being a war zone, and it's absolutely not the case. It's a peaceful, friendly, green and welcoming country, and it was disarmed in 2002. You can't actually own a gun in Sierra Leone. Also, this is a property investment, so it's not regulated by the FCA. It's important that people understand that distinction. What else? There's a person risk. Richard and I are key to this business, and there's only two of us. We're building a strong management team to support us and keep things going when we're not there. And it's important to say that we're not planning to go anywhere anytime soon. This is our business. We're in this for the very long term. Sorry, Jeremy, to interject there, I think it's important that we share with the chaps, if we haven't done already, the article
that came out just last week, wasn't it? About the United Nations have now this month withdrawn from Sierra Leone, and they were only there in an advisory position, essentially. So yeah, let's plot the history. It did have civil war. That was resolved, and we know the reasons why. We've discussed that. But over the last, what are we now, 13 years, that process has continued behind the scenes to the extent where, as of this month, and we'll give you the article, we'll email across, the UN have now withdrawn from Sierra Leone per se.
That was literally just the last of the few peacekeepers, you know, there in a sort of nominal role, but they were just finally saying, right, there's nothing more for us to do here. Because the government had been through 3 peaceful transitions, democratic elections. The current president, who's in his 2nd term, Mr. Koroma, he doesn't have a military background. He's a businessman. He used to run an insurance company. So very, very switched on guy, very intelligent, very thoughtful guy. And, you know, he's been absolutely fastidious in clamping down on corruption and graft, as they call it, which, you know, can be endemic in some African countries. But I would say that we've never paid, we can't pay, you know, we wouldn't pay, haven't been asked for any significant bribe at you know, at government level. We've done it straight by the straight by the book. So you know,
and have you had any I'll explain why I asked this question. When I worked in London for a brewery company some years ago, we refused to pay graft. It did result in 2 of our publicans, 2 of our landlords being severely dealt with by the people to whom we wouldn't pay graft. And have you had any reaction to not paying?
No.
So you haven't got that kind of criminality which is governing?
No. And, you know, hand on heart, I've never seen it, been exposed to it. You know, I've been there numerous times, never had any frightening or dangerous experiences. I'd walk around Freetown on my own, and I wouldn't, you know, clearly be careful, and you know, I wouldn't wave a wallet around, but I walk around on my own, and I wouldn't do that in Johannesburg or Nairobi, which I think would be considered, you know, much more, you know, civilized places.
Maybe even London's a threat, because one of my guys said to somebody one day, when there was a dispute over money, he said, hey, you know, I got friends, and the response was, son, you're gonna need them.
There was a great resolve in the country to move on. They were absolutely tired out and exhausted by 10 years of war. They'd forgotten what they were fighting, who they were fighting, what they were arguing about. You know, and I just, you know, enough is enough. And it's important also to realise that, or to understand that Sierra Leone is it's a partly Muslim country, partly Christian, and partly traditional. And it's a model case of coexistence among these religions. You know, and I'll speak to the Imam in the same way that I'll speak to the Reverend at the Wesleyan Chapel. And, you know, those two know each other, they're friends. There's Muslims marry Christians, Christians marry Muslims, etc. So I'm not overplaying the religious side of it. Religion is fundamental to the lives of most Sierra Leoneans. But it's, as a model of peaceful coexistence, what a shame that so many other countries aren't like that as well.
Oh, most countries are. It's just the minorities which cause it.
Okay.
With over 6 million people, you know, the minority in Sierra Leone would be very, very small, wouldn't it? So I don't think that's, you know, you see these divides as you go around the world, but where people get fed, and where people are warm, and where people are not a threat, it's different forces apply, you know. Anyway, I think what you're doing is great, and I think the product's good.
Can I just ask, sorry, can I just intervene and ask Nigel if he would just outline what the investment actually is for the investor? So because maybe have
absolutely. Yeah, and just on that, I just want to touch on something also regarding security aspects. Mike, I think this is really quite important for me. The involvement of Power Support Services is massive. And I can give you some information. I think you've already got some where you can do a bit of research, but will not align themselves and have never aligned themselves to anything where they're just uncomfortable. And the fact that it's been 2 years in the making tells you the level of research that they would go through, more so on Jeremy and Richard and the fundamentals and the actual activity.
It's because we have the unique ability to attribute each investment with an individual entity. So each investor invests in a farm, which is of a self-sustaining size, and we provided documentary proof on that within the DD. But in Sierra Leone, the average independent farm size is as little as 4.5 acres. So our smallest investment at £6,000 is 7.5 acres up to 40 or 50 acres. We could do more than that if an investor came in and wanted to invest more. But that's the key factor. That this is not an artificial construct, dividing it up into units, but then harvesting it as a whole. These are individual farms being run by individual people, and I think in that regard, because I would only want to be involved in something that I'm comfortable with in terms of it standing up to scrutiny. I'm just too simple, if you like, to come up with some convoluted structure or, it's the same basis that Sierra Resources is a UK incorporated company that owns a Sierra Leonean company. It's as simple as that. And we're quite happy to tell people who the shareholders are, how many shares they've got, etc., etc. So, this isn't a web of offshore banking accounts and, obscure structures. So, I like to think we're probably unique in that in that regard as well. Complex, just avoiding the complexity. Let's keep it simple. Let's do what we say we're going to do, and do it as well as we can.
Excellent.
Mr. Kosher, as they would say.
Nigel, then, could you please just highlight just what the investment deal is for the actual investor, please?
Absolutely. So very straightforward. The entry level is £6,000. That will buy you a farm of 7.5 acres. The upward investment will be based upon the farm sizes available, essentially. So it's not as if we can say it's 6,100, 6,200. Jeremy would need to work based upon what land allocation that he's got and what level of investment the client wants to put in. The maximum that we're looking at is £40,000, and that equates to 50 acres. And I think Jeremy's correct in saying that, if you've got a parcel of land which is ready to go and it's slightly more financially than a client would have, you'd be happy to work along those lines. Would that be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Flexibility. This is not, square boxes, so it's got to fit with the reality on the ground.
Yeah. So the client, let's work on the basis of a £6,000 investment. The client would invest their funds. They would lock into a 5-year structure. The returns would be paid on an annual basis, structured as year 1, 8% return, year 2, 10%, year 3, 12, year 4, 12.5, and year 5, 12.5. Bear in mind, this is a repayment of the amount of money that they put in. So this is based upon the fact that the farm owner is working in the field. Leone Resources are helping manage that financially and logistically, and the funds that are coming back are a repayment of the contribution that the investor makes initially. At the end of the year 5 structure, the client will get their initial capital back, plus they will get an uplift of 15%. So the combined value of all of that is 70%, 70. And if you just work that out over a 5-year structure, that's how we get to an average of 14%.
And it obviously can be quite lucrative. There is a market for the product. It's not a bad investment product. I think if you take all these factors into consideration, it really excites me. It excites me. I don't know about you guys. How about you, Mike? I mean, what's your initial thoughts and feedback on this product?
I've actually tried very hard to think of a downside question that I felt that I couldn't handle with the investor. I don't think there are any really. The whole thing at this point seems to stand up well. But can I just ask you one about the process, Nigel? I think it'll be you that answer this question. We have an investor. He's got 10,000 that he declares he wants to invest with us. What do we do from that point? We get him to sign off some paperwork that he's got 10,000.
Yeah, there are two forms, and actually, sorry, Jeremy, I'm going to bounce this to you as well, because I know you're working with Powers Court, aren't you, in terms of how that goes through. They were just finalising those. Is it just two forms that clients?
Yeah, the two contracts, for your signatures, transfer of funds. What we're working towards is having a menu, if you like, of available farms and the profiles of the people, the applicant people to run them. And, we'll match people with farms, and, it'll be the case that someone with £10,000, that's what, 12.5 acres or something. There is very likely to be a farm approximating to that size or slightly larger than that on that menu, and it'll associated with a particular person.
When do you expect to have that menu available?
I was promised it yesterday. Richard is conducting the initial interviews at the moment. We've certainly got a dozen people who.
Okay, so with the menu, it will make our job easier because you're selling a product rather than an idea then.
Yes.
So if we say,
very personalised as well, because each profile, what I've asked Richard to do is to get me a profile, get me a photograph of this person, man, woman, youth or mature person, whoever it may be. I want to know their family status, their experience, education standard, aspirations, interests, which football team they support. Well, that's, it seems trivial, but I think that, just a picture, so it's properly personalised. But I think that's what we're aspiring to, and certainly within a day or two, we'll have the first pass of that.
Okay.
And we'll attach those to, as Nigel says, farms between 7.5 and 50 acres. And if someone stepped forward and said, "Oh, I love this. This is fantastic. I'd like a really, really big farm," we'll work with them to make that come to fruition. So just because we put a cap on it doesn't mean that is the limit of the investment.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Is anybody any other questions? Any other queries?
I'm still listening.
All right.
Well, let me talk about the agricultural side of it, because what happened was that we were initially looking at becoming involved with alluvial mining, because there's a lot of mining in Sierra Leone. It's two of the biggest companies in Sierra Leone are London Mining and African Minerals, big iron ore extractive enterprises. They contribute a large amount to the GDP. So we were looking at opportunities in mining, and it soon became apparent actually that there was much more sense in agriculture, because Sierra Leone imports far too much of its rice, because the agricultural infrastructure was decimated during the Civil War. And okay, that ended more than 12 years ago now, but it's still coming back from effectively ground zero. So a country that should be exporting rice is importing it. It's a very fertile, well-watered, green country, so it's actually rather easy to grow stuff there. So we started looking for somewhere to grow some rice, and we negotiated initial leases with the local landowners, and we planted a small area of rice, and it grew, and we sold it. We thought, well, this is good. Let's do some more. And from that, it's grown and grown and grown, and it has become apparent that there are, with agriculture, you do get economies of scale. So our core business, Leone Resources, will have around 1,500 acres of rice in cultivation this year. We also have a plantation of moringa trees, which are a little known crop, but grown throughout Africa and Asia. It's a tree that you can eat the leaves, you can eat the pods, you can eat the seeds, you can make edible oil from the pods, etc., etc. Incredibly nutritious leaves. Can form a vital part of the diet in a country like Sierra Leone, where there's not a lot of protein and not a lot of vitamins in the diet. So our logic in growing moringa is that it's a commercially viable crop, but it will also contribute to the health of the local communities in Sierra Leone and potentially throughout West Africa. And we've already got the biggest plantation of moringa trees in Sierra Leone, if not West Africa. We've got 50,000 trees growing at the moment, and we're planting as fast as we can. But the moringa is very much subsidiary to our interest in rice, because rice is where the current market is. We're able to sell all the rice that we harvest. It's a very popular crop. The locals like the varieties that we grow. It's called country rice, and they like it because it's very flavoursome, and it also has quite a broken consistency. So when you cook it, it goes very stodgy, and that's how they like eating it out there. And it is a national dish, and the average Sierra Leonean will eat 100 kilos of rice a year. They'll have it for breakfast, lunch, dinner. So if you ever do visit Sierra Leone, you've got to get used to eating rice.
Right, yeah.
There ain't much else for it all the time. But we also started working increasingly started looking increasingly at how we could work more with local farmers to increase the reach and effectiveness of what we were doing. The first stage in that was starting an outgrower scheme, and because we had some a lot of surplus seed rice, we created a rice bank, which basically meant that we lend rice to local farmers. One of the problems that farmers face out there is that they don't have the capital or the resources or the size of operation to get a surplus that enables them to produce proper revenue, or indeed to produce enough crop to keep the seed for the next year. So by helping them acquire seed, we can give them a much more predictable income, that we can increase their crop size, etc., etc. So the rice bank consists, we give them the rice, they plant it, and they give us the rice that we gave them back, and the same again. So if we give them 2 sacks, at the time of harvest they give us 4 sacks back, which is a pretty straightforward arrangement, and it's worked so well. We've now got 137 farmers working with us on that scheme. And, we're not talking just 1 or 2 sacks per farm. We're talking quite a lot, because, and at the end of the year, for us, this makes a significant difference, because we're getting tons and tons of rice back into our store, which either we keep as seed or can be milled and sold. And from that outgrower scheme came the idea for Leone Farms, which is a way at the most fundamental level of helping local farmers in Sierra Leone get on the farming ladder, if you like. There's no institutional finance in Sierra Leone. Most of these people in the community there don't have bank accounts. They can't go and get a loan. So to say to them, right, we can help you establish yourself as a farmer and work with you to make it succeed is a really compelling argument for ambitious local people who are struggling to make their way, but they're ambitious, hardworking, and they have the basic skills to make this succeed. So setting them within the context of the training, the supplies, the facilities, the route to market that they need is a way of harnessing their energy to overall help the community and help our business. Although I stress that these are independent farms. These are independent farms, but it's the job of Leone Resources, which is the core company, to make sure that these farms succeed. So from the perspective of the investor, their security is coming from Leone Resources, which is an existing substantial operation. So we're not asking people they are investing in the farm, but we're not asking them just to hand their money to a local farmer, because they rightly say, well, how can that possibly work commercially and administratively? So we manage the financial side of it. The contracts are with Leone Resources, but the investment is in the individual farm. If that
actually makes a tremendous amount of sense, and it sounds like intelligent use of your resources in association with theirs. It's clever.
Yes.
Can I just ask you a couple of questions?
Yeah, please do.
Which I think are appropriate. Who owns the freehold of the land?
Well, outside the area around the capital, which has its own legislative system and land tenure system, in the whole rest of the country, the land is vested in the community. So you don't buy land freehold, you lease it, long-term lease. And this is, no matter whether you're a huge multinational or a small farmer, this is how it's done. So it's all leasehold, and it's a 50-year robust lease with a 21-year extension. And these leases are done in conjunction with the government. It's a formalised process, transparent with the local community. All the stakeholders are present. We've got an interpreter at all these meetings to read everything to all the locals, because we've lots of cases in the past of companies saying, yeah, put your thumbprint here, sign here, off you go. And that's how you get into the realm of land grab. They say, oh yeah, they're just taking all our land. That's absolutely not what we're doing. So this is a cooperative process with the local community. So our Leone Resources, because we've been there for some years, we've got relationships at the highest level, government and local community, we can negotiate really robust leases. So the head leases are held by Leone Resources. The beneficial interest in the land goes to the investor. The farmer operates the farm for 5 years to buy the land, to buy the farm from the investor. And at the end of 5 years, the farmer continues effectively as a tenant farmer of Leone Resources, but has the lease on his own farm. So there isn't a convoluted, opaque ownership arrangement here. We're in a position to negotiate the leases and make sure that they are as robust as they possibly can be.
So the money that's actually paid for the lease goes to the community or to the state?
The money that we pay for the lease, for the head lease, goes to a combination of the incumbent landowner, if there is one, who may or may not be using the land, in almost all cases, the land we take is currently unused. So a proportion will go to the incumbent landowner, a proportion will go to the community, and a proportion goes to the government. And, you know, it is conducted in a, as I say, in a transparent way, and people are familiar with and understand the process. And the lease is paid annually, and it's an accepted methodology.
So it's, when you say it's a robust 50-year lease,
Yes.
You're not paying up front for the lease, you're actually paying an annual sort of lease rent.
Yes. The Leone Farms project is based on the investor assuming beneficial ownership from Leone Resources. The farmer, in stage payments, buys that beneficial ownership from the investor. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's no such thing as freehold. It's all leasehold, but it's strong leases, and effectively it can be for 71 years, and it's paid for in that way.
Yes.
As an
freehold in Freetown itself, as I say, on the Freetown Peninsula, you can achieve freehold, but up country you can't under the current, traditional system.
What do you mean? What is the Freetown Peninsula?
Well, if you look at a map of Sierra Leone, you'll see that down the western side of the country there's Freetown at the top, and then an area 30 miles or whatever, which is a peninsula, which is the coastline, which is the original part of the country. For historical reasons, that has a different basis of land tenure.
Okay.
It harks back to colonial days, etc.
It is. I mean, it's more than the lifetime that we've got to live after we've made this sort of investment.
Yes.
Most people are going to make it when they're 30, 40, 50, and 71 years is a long time. Okay.
It is, but bear in mind that the Leone Farms proposition is based on a 5-year structured buyback. So from the investor's perspective, it's that 5 years that's significant. Obviously, they'll continue, hopefully, to care about us afterwards. But in fact, the government recognises that they need expertise and financial support. I don't mean charitable support. I mean investment support from companies like Britain, and they're particularly well disposed towards Europe and Britain in particular because of our traditional associations with the country, and as Nigel said, the fact that it was British troops who effectively brought about the end of the Civil War a long time ago. So they put together a very business-friendly environment for a company such as ours to operate within, with tax breaks and support of lease negotiations, freedom to import farming equipment without duty, etc., etc. So a lot of aspects of what we can do are facilitated by the government, and we've got a very good relationship directly with the Ministry of Agriculture in Freetown. Our office in Freetown is literally around the corner, and one of our guys will be there on some errand most days, talking to one of the ministers, deputy ministers, administrators, etc., etc. So it's great to have that level of support from the top, and that of course they realise that what we're doing is contributing to food security in Sierra Leone and reducing their reliance on imports. They want desperately Sierra Leone to become a net exporter again, because they know that's where the prosperity, future prosperity of the country is going to come from. And in the first instance, reducing imports is a pretty good step towards achieving that. I think it's important to say we're not a fundraising company. This is not a money raising business. This is a farming business that's working with the community in Sierra Leone. And I think it's easy to lose track of that, really, because I think people think they've got sometimes raising money. They think they've got a successful business when they raise the money. No, you've got a successful business when the business you're meant to be conducting is successful, not just that you've raised money for it.
But then, presumably, you take the first step, and then there's another step, and another step, and another step, and it's something which is there for the long term rather than just for the short term to get up to that level. So it is something that we could be talking about year after year after year, just building a better and better picture.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And we're currently working in one chiefdom, effectively, which is like a county. The surrounding chiefdoms have already come to us and said, come and work in our chiefdom, because we're operating in the north of the country. It's the most remote part of Sierra Leone, and the challenge that these communities face is that, apart from subsistence agriculture and maybe a bit of informal mining, there isn't any meaningful employment for kids coming out of school. So what happens inexorably is that they end up drifting towards McKinney, which is the largest local centre, or to Freetown, which is a capital, which is disproportionately large. The population of Sierra Leone is only 5.5, 6 million, and the biggest proportion of those live in Freetown, and Freetown is overcrowded. Aspects of it are unsanitary. It's overloaded, and it's no life for people who get dragged there. So if we can provide a means to help them gain employment in the local community, it's a major contribution to their lives. Overall MOU agreement, top level agreement with the government is and the local community is for us to have access to 45,000 acres of land, which is an enormous amount. And it's easy to bandy figures around, because so many people, when they're talking about large-scale agricultural investments, they say, it's 100,000 hectares of, oil palm or maize or whatever. 45,000 acres is a monstrous amount. It is a small, it's a small British county. It's enormous. At the moment, as I say, we've got 1,500 acres under rice. We've got about another 500 under moringa trees. We've got 1,000 acres initially allocated to the Leone Farms project. There's another 2,000 acres being planned out, and the lease is progressed at the moment. So if we can get to 5,000, 10,000 acres within 2 or 3 years, I think we'd be very happy, and that still produces an enterprise as a whole, producing many thousands of tons of rice, and with an overall enterprise value of many millions of pounds. But that's as a whole. We're talking in Leone Farms about these small individual units, and it's entirely possible with the correct level of support and training and critical mass in terms of size, access to machinery, to make each of those units completely viable in its own right, to work for the farmer, but also to work for Leone Resources by enabling us to leverage our investment in equipment more, by providing us with access to more rice, which we're processing and selling on. So it's all part of quite a complex equation.